It begins with a road that shouldn't exist. A single dirt track winding through the fog-choked forests of Missouri's Ozark Range, a place so deep in the hills that maps refuse to show it. Locals call it Cold Hollow Ridge, though few have ever seen it with their own eyes. The air there smells of pine sap, wet earth, and something faintly metallic like rusted blood. It was on this road that Eli Mercer, a 24-year-old photographer from St. Louis, found himself one early autumn morning in 1924. He had come chasing a story, a letter from his estranged cousin June Vancroft, who lived with her twin sister Iris in an inherited mountain homestead. The letter had been simple. "We found something beneath the cellar. You'll want to see it. Come alone." No signature, no return address. Just that single line, written in trembling ink. As Eli's truck creaked up the incline, mist swallowed the world around him. The forest grew tighter, gnarled trees twisting like arthritic fingers. His headlights picked out the faint shimmer of something hanging from branches. Old glass jars, some filled with murky liquid, others with pale objects that looked like teeth. The moment he killed the engine, silence fell, thick and absolute. Even the crickets refused to sing. He stepped out, boots crunching against gravel. The cabin loomed ahead, a dark wooden carcass of a house. Its windows were boarded, yet candlelight flickered faintly from within. He knocked once, no answer. Twice. A soft shuffling sound came from the other side of the door. Then, it creaked open. Standing there were the Vancroft twins, June and Iris, identical and yet not. Both wore long, dust-colored dresses, their hair braided tightly down their backs. Their skin was pallid, almost translucent, and their eyes gray, distant like storm clouds about to break. June smiled faintly. "You came, Eli. We weren't sure you would." Her voice carried an echo, as though spoken from a hollow place. Eli tried to return her smile. "You said you found something." "In the cellar?" The sisters exchanged a glance, the kind of silent conversation that only twins could share. Then Iris gestured for him to come inside. The cabin's interior smelled of cedar and mildew. The walls were lined with faded photographs, dozens of them, all showing generations of the Vancroft family. Each face looked grim, distant, and eerily similar. "Where's Uncle Silas?" Eli asked. June's expression faltered. "He's gone down to the hollow," she whispered. "He won't be back for a while." Something about her tone made Eli's stomach tighten. They led him to the cellar door. It was padlocked with a thick iron latch, though fresh scratch marks ran down the wood, as if someone had tried to claw their way out. June produced a key from a chain around her neck and turned it slowly. The lock gave a reluctant click. The air that seeped out was cold and damp, like a crypt. A single lantern flickered to life as Iris descended the stairs, her footsteps echoing softly. Eli followed, every creak of the boards beneath him sounding like a scream in the silence. At the bottom, the cellar opened into a wide chamber of stone. Mason jars lined the shelves, filled with murky liquids and strange preserved things. Old dolls without eyes, animal bones tied with twine. But what made Eli freeze was the hole in the center of the room, a jagged pit dug into the earth, no more than 5 feet across. From within it came a faint sound. A slow, wet breathing. June knelt beside the pit, her fingers trembling. "It started 3 nights ago," she whispered. "We heard him calling." "Who?" Eli's voice cracked. She turned toward him, eyes wide, wet with tears that glimmered in the lantern light. "The cousin who never left." A sharp metallic clang echoed through the cabin above, the sound of the front door slamming shut. Eli spun around, heart pounding. The lantern flickered violently, then steadied. "What was that?" he hissed. Neither sister answered. They only stared at the pit. The sound from below grew louder, like someone dragging a hand across damp stone. Then came a whisper, so faint, Eli thought it might be the wind. "June," she flinched. "He remembers my name." The lantern went out. Darkness swallowed everything. And in that perfect, airless black, Eli heard the unmistakable sound of something climbing up from the hole. The darkness inside the cellar was absolute. The kind of darkness that didn't just swallow the light, it listened to it die. Eli's breath came in short, shaky bursts. He fumbled for his matches, struck one, and froze. June and Iris were standing motionless beside him, their faces illuminated in trembling orange light. Their eyes were fixed on the pit, and from the pit came a sound like wet cloth sliding across stone. Something was moving. Slowly, purposefully. Eli's match burned down to his fingertips. He hissed and dropped it. Darkness again. Then another sound, a faint scrape, like nails dragging across the inside of the pit wall. "He's waking up," June whispered. "What the hell are you talking about?" Eli hissed back. "Who's in there?" Neither sister answered. Instead, Iris lifted her lantern and turned the flame up just a bit. The dim light caught movement, something pale rising from the pit. A hand. Long, bone-thin fingers covered in dirt and dried blood. It gripped the edge of the pit, knuckles cracking as it pulled. Eli stumbled back. Jesus. June grabbed his arm. Her grip was icy. Don't speak his name here. Then the thing emerged. At first, Eli thought it was a man. The frame was roughly human, tall, gaunt, and shaking. But the skin looked wrong. It wasn't the color of flesh anymore. It was gray, tight, like wet parchment stretched over bone. Its eyes were sunken but alive, glimmering faintly in the lantern light. And when it spoke, its voice sounded like air being pushed through water. "You came back." June stepped forward, trembling. "We couldn't leave you down there forever." Eli turned toward her, horrified. "You know this thing?" She didn't answer, just reached out her hand toward the creature's face. Iris joined her, murmuring something under her breath. Words that sounded old, wrong, ritualistic. The creature tilted its head. Its mouth twitched. Almost a smile. Then, without warning, it lunged. Eli grabbed June and pulled her back as the thing's arms flailed, knocking jars from the shelves. They shattered, releasing the stench of rot and vinegar. He stumbled toward the stairs, shouting for the sisters to run. But June didn't move. Neither did Iris. They stood there, watching. Smiling. "Move!" Eli yelled again, but they only tilted their heads, their faces serene, almost adoring. The creature crawled closer, its movements jerky and wrong, joints bending the wrong way. It reached for Eli, and that's when the floorboards above groaned. Something heavy was moving in the house above them. Iris whispered, "He's awake too." Eli froze. Who's awake?" Before she could answer, the lantern flame flickered violently and went out again. The cellar was plunged into blackness. Then, from the shadows came a new sound. Footsteps. Slow, dragging, heavy. And the creak of a door. Eli spun toward the stairs, just in time to see a silhouette descending. Tall, broad, the unmistakable shape of a man, but the sound wasn't right. The feet made no solid thud. It was a sliding, grinding sound, like bone dragging against wood. June and Iris dropped to their knees, their heads bowed. "Father," they whispered in unison. Eli's heart stopped. Uncle Silas Vancroft had been dead for 15 years. The air inside the cellar grew so thick it felt like it was breathing with them. Each breath Eli took came back heavier, wetter, as though the house itself was exhaling into his lungs. The figure on the stairs descended one step at a time, dragging something long behind him, a length of rusted chain. The sound of it against the wood was hypnotic. Clink, scrape, clink, scrape. Eli's mind rebelled. He had seen Silas Vancroft's grave, had helped shovel the dirt himself 15 years ago. But the man on the stairs, if it was even a man, moved like something that remembered being human only by habit. The lantern flame sputtered back to life, casting flickering orange across the cellar. And there he was, Silas Vancroft. Or what was left of him. His skin was dry and gray, stretched tight over his skull. His eyes were cloudy, but burning with something fierce, something hungry. His once brown beard was white and brittle, hanging in thin ropes to his chest, but it was his mouth that made Eli's stomach twist. Stitched at the corners with coarse black thread, as if someone had tried to seal something inside. June rose first. Her voice was trembling, but her eyes glowed with a kind of reverence that chilled Eli to the bone. "Father, it's time. The bloodline can't die with us," the creature at the pit hissed, almost in protest. Its voice was faint, wet. "He promised." Silas's head turned toward the sound. His neck cracked with each motion, but his eyes never left his daughter's. "And the promise will be kept." Eli stumbled backward. "This is insane. He's dead." "You buried him." June and Iris turned toward him in unison, slow, deliberate. "No one buried him," Iris said softly. "He buried himself, so he could wake when the blood thinned." The words didn't make sense, and yet in that house, surrounded by the smell of decay and old dirt, they felt true. Silas stepped off the last stair, the chain dragging behind him. His shadow loomed across the cellar wall, taller than a man should be. He walked to the pit, knelt beside the other creature and laid a skeletal hand on its head. "You waited. You were faithful." Then, to Eli's horror, Silas lifted the chain and fastened it around the creature's neck. The thing didn't resist. It trembled, groaning softly, almost like a child being comforted. June whispered, "He'll keep the gate closed." Like before, Eli tried to move, but his legs refused to obey. The cellar was alive with whispers now. Dozens of them, coming from the walls, the dirt, the floor above. Faint voices murmuring in some forgotten tongue. Silas turned his head, those cloudy eyes fixing on Eli. "You've brought new blood," he rasped. "That's why the river led you here." I didn't. But the air shifted. Something unseen brushed Eli's shoulder. Cold, sharp, The whispering stopped. Silas raised a finger, and the cellar went silent. Then he smiled. "You'll see soon enough, boy. The mountain doesn't like outsiders. It remembers what belongs to it." Behind him, the pit began to glow faintly. Not with light, but with movement. The dirt at the bottom writhed, like something breathing just beneath the surface. Eli bolted. He sprinted up the stairs, slamming into the cellar door. But it wouldn't budge. It was nailed shut from the outside. He turned back just as Silas and the sisters began to chant, their voices weaving together in a low, terrible harmony. The glow from the pit pulsed with their words, in rhythm with their breathing. Then, from beneath the floorboards upstairs came another sound. A heartbeat. Slow? Deep. Inhuman. The boards flexed with each thud. Dust rained from the ceiling. June looked up and whispered, smiling faintly, "Mother's awake." The heartbeat grew louder. It didn't echo through the walls like sound. It moved through them, rattling the glass jars, trembling the chains, shaking dust loose from the ancient beams. Each pulse made the cellar feel smaller. The air thickened, heavy with something that smelled like earth and blood and iron. Eli backed up until his shoulders hit the door. His hands scrabbled over the rough boards for any weakness, but the nails held firm. Behind him, June and Iris had fallen to their knees again, eyes closed, lips moving silently. Silas raised both hands, palms toward the ceiling. The heartbeat slowed, just a little, but the space above them answered with a groan so deep it sounded geological. The ceiling bowed, and then a fine trickle of soil began to fall between the boards. Eli stared up. There was something moving above them, not walking, but shifting. Something massive. Something that filled the entire room above, June whispered. She's been waiting for the thaw. When the frost melts, she breathes again. The lantern light flickered wildly. Eli could see Silas's outline trembling as he spoke in that same low, ritual tone. The mountain bore her. The mountain keeps her. Then the boards split. One long crack, straight across the ceiling, spilling dirt and roots and a terrible smell of decay. A pale shape pressed against the gap, soft, glistening skin. It wasn't human. It was too large, too pale, too alive. The flesh seemed to pulse with the same rhythm as the heartbeat. Eli ducked as a splinter fell past his ear. He had stopped breathing. Every instinct told him to run, but there was nowhere left to go. The sisters began to sing. Their voices were thin, quavering, the sound of children remembering a lullaby they should have forgotten. Silas turned toward the pit. "Bring her the keeper," he said. The creature chained inside the pit began to wail, a desperate, high-pitched sound that curdled into something animal. Silas tugged on the chain once, twice, and the thing crawled out, its hands leaving streaks of black soil on the stone floor. When it reached the light, Eli saw its face clearly for the first time. It had no eyes, just pits, and a mouth that never closed, teeth gray and jagged, the gums split like old scars. June took its arm gently, whispering something Eli couldn't hear. Then, still singing, the twins guided it toward the glowing fissure in the ceiling. The flesh above shifted again, almost leaning down to meet them. The creature lifted its head. Its mouth opened wider, wider until it was nothing but a hole, and from deep inside came a roar that made the walls shudder. Silas raised his arms. "Feed her, and she'll keep the mountain still." Eli didn't wait to see what that meant. He grabbed the lantern and hurled it against the door. The glass shattered. Flames licked up the wood. Smoke filled the room instantly. The chanting broke. The sisters screamed, not in fear but in fury. Silas turned, his milky eyes blazing, and shouted a word Eli couldn't understand. The flames bent against the air, curling back toward Eli. He threw himself against the door again, and this time it gave way. The wood tore free from the frame, nails snapping loose. Eli stumbled out into the night. The forest outside was silent, moonlight sharp as glass. He ran, half blind, half mad, tripping through underbrush, branches tearing at his clothes. Behind him, the cabin glowed red. The roof bulged once, twice, and then burst outward in a shower of dirt and splinters. Something rose from the ruin. Something so vast and shapeless his mind refused to name it. The last thing he saw before the smoke swallowed everything was the twins standing in the yard, hand in hand, their hair whipping in the firelight, smiling up at the thing that had come to claim them. The fire on Cold Hollow Ridge burned for 3 days. Locals from the nearest settlement, 2 miles down the mountain, said they saw the glow through the trees but didn't dare climb up to see. Because in those woods, they said, fire meant something had woken. When the smoke finally cleared, the cabin was gone. Nothing left but black earth and a circle of stones that seemed older than the forest itself. The sheriff's men found only one survivor. Eli Cartwright was discovered 3 days later, staggering down an old mining trail, covered in ash and blood, his eyes wild and unblinking. He was half delirious, muttering the same phrase over and over. "The mountain breathes. The mountain remembers. They brought him to town, but he never spoke a full sentence again. Just fragments, about a family that wasn't quite human, about whispers in the soil, about a woman beneath the ground who fed on faith and kin. By the time spring came, Eli was gone too. He vanished from the county asylum without a trace. The only thing left in his cot was a handful of dirt. The case was written off as tragedy, fire, madness, isolation. But the people who lived in the valley below Cold Hollow Ridge didn't believe it was over. Because at night, when the fog rolled in from the river, they swore they could hear singing from the mountain. 20 years passed. A new generation came, and the old tales faded, like all horrors do when time dulls their edges. By 1918, the war had taken most of the young men. The Ozarks were quiet, almost forgotten, until the government sent engineers to survey the ridge for mining potential. The crew set up camp near the old trail, not far from where the Vancroft house had once stood. They laughed at the stories the locals told. Witches, inbred spirits, mountain ghosts. They were men of science, of progress. But the foreman, a man named Lyle Merritt, kept a small silver cross in his breast pocket. He said his father used to talk about that hill, said there were things you shouldn't dig up, even if they were worth their weight in gold. On the second night, one of the men, Thomas Gray, went missing. The next morning, they found his boots beside a patch of disturbed earth, his footprints circling the spot again and again before vanishing entirely. No blood, no struggle. Just the faintest impression of a handprint pressed deep into the mud, far too large to be human. The others tried to leave. The horses refused to move. That night they heard it again. A faint, mournful humming that seemed to drift up from the ground itself. They followed it, lanterns in hand, to a hollow where the soil was cracked and steaming, as though the mountain still burned from inside. Lyle knelt and pressed his hand against the dirt. It was warm, beating, like a heart. The next day, the government called the project off. Too unstable, they said. Too dangerous. The ridge was sealed off, declared unsafe for mining, unfit for settlement. But in the valley below, the stories returned. People said the Vancroft twins still walked the woods after dusk, pale and barefoot, their dresses gray with ash. They said if you stood too long on the ridge, you could feel the ground shift beneath your boots, like something huge was turning over in its sleep. And if you listened closely enough, you could hear it breathe. By the 1940s, Cold Hollow Ridge had become a name people only whispered in passing. The road leading up to it was overgrown, the wooden bridge half collapsed, and the trail itself swallowed by moss and fog. But still, every few years, someone would go missing near it. Hunters, trappers, travelers who took the wrong path. And always, the same thing followed, that low, hollow hum echoing through the valley. Locals called it the singing ground. Most thought it was just wind slipping through the rocks. But the old families of the Ozarks, those who still remembered the name Vancroft, stayed off the ridge after dark. They said it wasn't wind. It was breathing. In 1946, a man named Dr. Harold Bellamy, an anthropologist from the University of Missouri, came to study the folklore of the region. He'd heard stories about the mountain twins, ghostly figures seen near the ridge, often just before someone disappeared. To him, it was all local superstition, an opportunity to document the evolution of backwoods myth. He brought a tape recorder, a camera, and a young assistant named Clara Dunn, who'd grown up only 50 miles away. Locals warned them not to camp near the ridge. Bellamy smiled politely, thanked them, and went anyway. On the first night, they pitched their tent beside a dried creek bed, the forest eerily quiet except for the occasional cry of an owl. By midnight, the wind had stopped. The crickets, too. Clara sat by the fire, flipping through her notebook. "Feels dead out here," she said. Bellamy chuckled. "Silence is the sound of truth. Once the world stops talking, that's when it begins to tell you something worth hearing." Then came the hum, soft at first, a low vibration beneath their feet. The flame in the lantern rippled as if disturbed by breath. Clara frowned. "That's not wind." Bellamy leaned down, pressed his ear to the soil, and froze. "It's coming from below." The sound deepened, rhythmic now, almost alive. It rose through the ground in steady waves. "A pulse," Clara whispered. "It's like the earth has a heartbeat." The fire flickered violently. And then, from beyond the circle of trees, came a light, faint, moving. Bellamy stood, shielding his eyes. Someone's there. But as it drew closer, they realized it wasn't a lantern. The glow was too pale, too soft, like moonlight reflected in water. Except there was no water near. Two shapes emerged. Figures of women, barefoot, their dresses gray and tattered, their hair long and matted, their faces wrong. Not decayed, not alive, preserved. The sisters. Clara stumbled backward, choking on her breath. Bellamy stepped forward, mesmerized. My God, they're real. The figures stopped at the edge of the firelight. Their lips didn't move, but their voices filled the clearing. Two tones speaking as one. The blood returns. The ground trembled. The hum turned into a groan, the trees bending inward like they were being drawn toward the ridge. Clara screamed, pulling Bellamy back, but his eyes were fixed on the sisters, fascinated, entranced. "Do you hear that?" he whispered. "They're singing." And then the light went out. The lantern, the fire, the stars, everything. Darkness. When Clara woke at dawn, the tent was shredded. Bellamy was gone. His tape recorder sat half buried in the dirt, still running. She pressed play. Static. Then a faint, distant humming. Then Bellamy's voice, trembling. It's not song. It's her heart. It's still beating. Then a second voice. A woman's. Barely above a whisper. He shouldn't have touched the soil. The tape ended. When rescuers arrived a week later, they found Clara wandering near the base of the ridge, barefoot, covered in dirt, her pupils wide and unresponsive. She never spoke again. Dr. Bellamy's remains were never recovered, but his camera was found near a dead tree, its last photograph showing only blurry shapes in motion and a faint light beneath the ground. The negatives were sent to the university for analysis. Every single one came back blank. The lab technician swore the emulsion had been burned away from the inside out. The mountain wind howled like an ancient curse, screaming through the broken boards of the cabin as if the forest itself was alive and angry. The sisters were arguing again, but this time their voices had no rhythm of laughter or seduction in them, only panic. Sarah was pacing, her bare feet tracking muddy prints across the floor. "He knows, Mary. He saw the letters. He's been writing to that sheriff in Ava." Mary's eyes flicked toward the cellar door, where muffled coughing echoed up through the floorboards. "Then he's not leaving," she said coldly. "Not this time," Sarah's voice trembled. "You're talking about killing him." Mary didn't answer. She walked to the kitchen counter, lifted the rusted cleaver their father had once used on hogs, and stared at its chipped edge. "You think Pa would have let anyone ruin what we built here?" Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "Pa's dead. He's been dead 10 years, Mary." "We ain't him." Mary turned, a twisted smile spreading across her lips. "Ain't we?" Lightning slashed across the windows, illuminating the walls covered with old, faded photographs. Children with hollow eyes, women with faces scratched out. The sisters' family tree, if it could even be called that, was a shrine of rot. Down below, in the damp black of the cellar, their cousin Thomas stirred. His wrists bled against the shackles, his breath shallow and fast. He had spent months down there, surviving on scraps and whispers. He had thought he could charm Sarah, convince her to let him go. But now he could hear the cleavers scrape, the muffled arguing, the sound of the latch. When the cellar door creaked open, he didn't scream. He just whispered, "Please." Sarah hesitated at the top step, candle trembling in her hand. Mary stood behind her, the cleaver reflecting the flame. "Do it," Mary hissed. "End this." But Sarah dropped the candle. It hit the dirt floor, the flame exploding into a hungry blaze as oil from the lantern leaked and caught. Within seconds, the cellar was alive with fire. Thomas lunged for the stairs, but the sisters stumbled back, coughing, the air filling with smoke and screams. Mary shrieked and tried to pull the cellar door closed, but the flames burst through, engulfing her skirt. Sarah tried to smother it, but it was too late. The cabin burned through the night. By dawn, it was nothing but char and bone. The sheriff's men arrived days later after seeing smoke from miles away. They found 3 bodies in the ashes, 2 women, 1 man, blackened, fused together. Impossible to tell where one ended and the other began. The official report said the fire was accidental. Locals whispered otherwise. They said the mountain took back what was never meant to live upon it. Years later, hikers passing through those same woods would claim to hear soft singing at night, 2 women's voices, harmonizing sweetly through the trees. And sometimes, if you stopped to listen long enough, another voice would join in, low, strained, and desperate, singing from somewhere underground. Epilogue: the ashes never sleep. The fire should have erased everything. That's what Sheriff Walter Griggs told himself as he stood on the mountain ridge, smoke still rising from the ruins below. But something about it felt wrong, too deliberate, too clean. The storm that night hadn't even touched the ridge. There were no lightning strikes here. No reason for flame. He walked through the blackened remains of the Vancroft cabin, boots crunching over glass and bone. The air reeked of burnt wood and something else, something metallic, almost sweet. He paused when he saw the cellar door. It hadn't been fully consumed. The iron hinges were warped, but the door still held its shape, as if resisting the fire. Griggs motioned for his deputy. "Get that open." The 2 men pried it loose. The stench that rolled out was so foul, the deputy gagged and stepped back. But Griggs went down anyway, lantern in hand. The stairs groaned beneath him, half burnt but still sturdy. The cellar wasn't empty. There were chains on the wall, dozens of them, a chair bolted to the floor. A small table with rusted scalpels, bits of cloth, and what looked like human teeth laid out like trophies. And then there was the wall. It was covered in carvings, hundreds of names scratched into the stone with desperate hands. Each one marked with a date. The last name was Thomas Vancroft. Below his name, carved in smaller trembling letters, was one final line. They were not sisters. They were his daughters. Griggs staggered back, the lantern trembling in his hand. The truth hit him like a hammer. The sisters everyone in town whispered about, the reclusive women who lived alone after their father's death, weren't sisters at all. They were his children, born from his own madness, kept hidden, raised in the dark, and molded into something unspeakable. And then he saw something else, half buried under a pile of cinders. He crouched, brushed away the ash, and froze. It was a photograph, faded, but intact. It showed the family standing outside the same cabin years earlier, the father in the center, towering and grim, the two young girls on either side, holding hands, but behind them, in the window, barely visible, was a man's face. A stranger. Eyes hollow, mouth sewn shut. Griggs dropped the photo. By the time the sun broke through the clouds, the sheriff had the entire area sealed. But the records were sealed too. No reports, no official cause. The town forgot. People moved on. Until, decades later, hikers found a collapsed foundation deep in those same woods. Beneath it, a room untouched by fire. The chains were still there. The names still carved. And beside them, 3 fresh ones. No one ever found who carved them. Locals say when the fog settles over the Ozark Ridge, you can hear the faint clink of chains, and voices singing from beneath the ground, 2 women's voices and a man's crying out in rhythm. And when you listen long enough, they stop singing. Because they're listening back. Post-credits sequence. The footage they shouldn't have found. October 2024. A team of urban explorers calling themselves Echo Depths uploaded a teaser to their YouTube channel, a 20-second clip titled, "Exploring the Forgotten Cellar in the Ozarks." The footage began normally. Shaky night vision, soft wind through the trees, muffled laughter. The camera panned across a dense forest before stopping at what looked like a depression in the ground. One of the explorers, a man named Travis Keene, whispered, "It's right here. GPS says this is the old Vancroft site." They pried up a slab of concrete, revealing a narrow stairwell descending into blackness. "Holy hell," one woman muttered. "This air hasn't moved in 100 years." The camera followed them down. The cellar walls were slick with moisture, the air heavy with rot. Their flashlights caught faint shapes, rusted chains bolted to the stone, a chair twisted out of shape, fragments of teeth and bone glittering in the dust. Then one of them noticed the carvings. "Names," Travis said, leaning close. All over the wall. The camera zoomed in. Dozens of etched names, dates from the 1800s. And at the bottom, 3 new ones. Travis Keene. Lara Wynn. Eddie Holt. The group froze. "Dude, what the hell?" Eddie whispered. "That's us." The feed distorted for a moment. A sharp burst of static, then a flicker of movement in the corner of the frame. Something shifted behind them. "Did you hear that?" Lara's voice cracked. The sound came again. A metallic clink, like a chain sliding across the floor. Then another, louder. Closer. Travis spun around, shining the flashlight into the far corner. For a split second, something pale moved. Not walking, but crawling. Too fast, too silent. The screen filled with static. The last frame before the video cut out was a face. White, eyeless, with a mouth sewn shut by blackened thread, pressed inches from the lens. The video went offline within 6 hours. The Echo Depths channel was deleted. Their car was found abandoned at a gas station 20 miles from the mountain. Police said it was a hoax. Locals didn't believe them, because 2 weeks later, a new video appeared, uploaded from Travis's account, though his phone was never recovered. It was only 5 seconds long, a single shot of a dark cellar. Chains swinging, and a faint woman's voice whispering. "We found new names." The screen stays black for a few seconds after the final whisper. Then, a slow, hollow wind fades in, the sound of it passing through the broken boards of a long-forgotten cabin. A faint light flickers the glow of an oil lantern swinging from a nail. Dust floats in the beam. The cellar door, half buried in earth, creaks open just an inch. A woman's voice, almost a breath, says, "Blood remembers, even when the world forgets." The light dies. The wind stops. Only silence remains. Then your channel's title slowly fades onto the screen in pale, cracked lettering. Forgotten remains. Where the past refuses to stay buried, a final whisper trails as the outro fades to black. We'll see you where history hides.